Today we are doing, without question, my most requested video from you guys, which is how I photo edit or post-process my images.
I was sure I'd never find someone to make my head spin around. No one's ever gonna be the thing I need, they all just let me down. But baby, you saved me, yeah, baby, you saved me, you saved me. You turn everything grey, clouded in navy, into new shades. You color me, oh, so worth the wait. Glad I was patient, 'cause you color me, till I'm brand new. Looking in the mirror, I'm brand new. Everything's so different now.
Welcome back to 1 Month 2 Cameras. I'm Allie, and this is my post-it corner, as you can see. We're going to start with the photo processing process. That's redundant. But basically, we're going to be working through your photos because I thought it would be a lot more fun to edit your images than my own, which I do all the time, and a little bit more challenging as well. So I put out the call on Instagram and you guys answered. And then some. There were a lot of submissions, so I had to narrow it down. Thank you very much for the submissions. I really appreciated it. I wish I could do them all, and in fact, I did do them all, and I timed it, and it was over 2 hours. So I'm going to spare you that headache. That being said, there will be another section where we talk about kind of some of the presets that are out there. I feel like I have tried, honestly, everything on the market. Not really, but I have spent way more money than I ever should spend on post-processing stuff because I love it. This is what makes me happy. I love the editing process, almost equal to the image shooting process, which is not true for everyone. So I'm going to show you some easy ways, some harder ways, and then I'm going to tell you what presets I personally can vouch for and recommend out of all of the lot that I have tried. And then the third thing will be a post-processing technique for getting a film look out of digital files that is not my own, but one that I thought was quite interesting and one that I will give you and offer you as just a way to experiment if that is what you're going for. I know a lot of you shoot film and digital side by side and want to try to find that medium sort of happy place where they sort of align a bit more. And there's a way to do that using software you likely already have if you're a film shooter. So we'll come to that at the end. So with that being said, let's jump into it and talk about some editing. Okay, so here we go. We're importing. Let's dive right into it. So the first thing I always do is go and apply my profile, which is a free download in the show description below. It shows up here as OMTC Sigma Quattro H because that's originally how I developed this look, but what I found is it was working well on a lot of the images. It gives me the general look that I like, so I start here for the most part on everything. And this, let's see what we have here. This is a DNG file from the DxO. I bet it's the DxO1. Do I have any meta data? DxO1. Yes. Okay, so DxO1, this is interesting because it's a CMOS sensor, and I really did not develop this profile with CMOS in mind. So just to give an overview of what a profile is versus a preset, as you can see, I have a lot of presets over here. I am a preset junkie. I am obsessed with post-processing, so I like to study everything and try to learn as much as I can. But this is a profile, which is more about, Adobe RAW has their profiles that are built into their platform. As you can see, this is a much more modern, much cleaner look than if we were to go with the Sigma or the OMTC profile that I just renamed OMTC because it's a universal profile that I use. And the way you use profiles is you adjust strength here. So this is all the way off, what the image was like straight out of camera, and then you can increase it all the way over here, which is too much. I am usually working anywhere between 50 to 100% on this profile, depending on the image and the file. So turning this info off. All right, so truthfully. I don't know if there's much more I would do to this file right off the bat, like maybe a little boost in the exposure, but honestly, I don't even, I mean, I'm pretty happy right there. I would call that a day. That was easy, right? So that's just using the profile there. Okay, then, okay, this is a CR2, so this means this is a Canon. Which Canon, we don't know. I struggle with Canon, guys. At least the CCD Canons is funny because I don't know why, but I find CCD Canons to be a little harder. So we're going to do this fully manual, not using the preset. I'll show you the preset just so you can, I'm sorry, I keep saying that, preset, profile. I'll show you the profile so you can kind of see what it does. And actually, this works pretty nice. I might just warm it up a touch. Actually, I'm not going to do that too much because I'm liking where it's going. I might dehaze it a little bit just to bring a pop, bring a little more clarity, or actually reduce clarity a bit, and maybe just boost the texture a touch. And I would call that, honestly, that's probably all I would do. I try to keep this really short and sweet. I don't want to spend all my time in my computer. I'd rather like try to just get a quick look. I'm notorious for like getting home after a shoot, doing all of my photos really fast. I go with a gut instinct and I get it out and I just post it. I don't overthink things, maybe to a fault, honestly, but it works. It's enough, you know, like I'm not doing this professionally, right? So let's not agonize over it. All right, so resetting this, what would I do to this if I had no profile? This is what I would do. So I think I would start by bringing the exposure down a little bit just to richen the color and the contrast a little bit. And then I would, you know, the color looks pretty good. Let's go to daylight. It's pretty clean, not a lot of color cast or anything like that here. In terms of my vibe, I do like things on the warm side, but I'm not going to warm it up in the white balance. I am going to do it a little bit more in the color wheels, so in the color grade. So the classic is like the orange and teal, right? But don't go crazy with it because otherwise it looks like you're trying to make, I'm sorry, a bad Hollywood movie. It's just got to be said. And what's interesting is this is so subtle, you barely see it, but you do start to see a little bit of color coming up here. It's too red. Okay, so maybe right in here. Again, subtle, but it just warms it up ever so much. And in kind of a, just because this is, a lot of this is sitting in kind of this mid-tone section, it is giving it a little bit more of a global pass, but you know, you're not, this would be the global here. So if you do this, this is really going to affect the image overall. That's too much for me though. So I'm just going to leave that where it was. And then let's go up here. Turn curve, guys. Wow. Okay. I'm going to be okay. Let's go to this one here, which is just your linear tone curve. All right, so I'm just going to put 3 points on here. And I apologize if this is going a little too far, but I want to show you all the different ways. I do not do this on the regular. It's why I created that profile. I did all this pre-work, then I created a profile from it in order to not have to do this all the time. But this is kind of how I got there. So I typically taper off the highlights. So you get a little bit more of that filmic roll off, right? So you can see already what's happening here in this highlight area. It's just softening everything a little bit. And in this case, this image is a little bit bright for me in the highs. So maybe I'll bring this down. I could possibly bring this up. And it's kind of locking the, I still like my contrast, so I'm going to keep this in here. And then if you want to add that like faded black look, you bring this up a little bit. I'm not super into that myself, but you know, to each their own. So after, before, after. you can tell it just kind of flattens it out a little bit. And then this is where it's, you know, classic editing stuff. I go back and I tweak a little bit more, and now I'm gonna bring up the brightness here overall. But you can still see we're making pretty, you know, it seems like small moves, but then when you go before and after, which I always go back and look at, it starts to look extreme. And then you go, okay, I went a little too far on my highlights, so I'm going to come and bring this back down a little bit. And you can just bring the saturation down a little bit closer to the center. And then we start to have that. Now the other thing that I typically do is, you can do this a couple of ways. I adjust the hues of my image quite frequently, mostly focusing, I would say, on the blue. I am a big stickler for like blue skies and the way that the blue renders. Now this is easily overdone. Like this is where it starts to get into like OG Instagram crazy looks of 2010 or whenever that was that they first came out. But just a little bit here is where I like to go. So like maybe 10. Yeah, let's go to 10. All right, so we're going to the 10 on the hue, saturation. This can go a couple of ways, but in this case, well, look at just boosting the saturation a little bit. I typically actually, oh well, I thought I was boosting it, but I was reducing it. And I was gonna say I typically desaturate it a little bit and bring up the luminance a little bit. And that's what I'm gonna do here. All right. Let's see. Then the other thing I was going to do is looking at a little dehaze on this, just to bring a little more punch. Again, coming up on that exposure again, maybe down on the highlights a touch. It's just a lot of playing. There is no formula for me, or at least the way I work. I just enjoy tweaking and playing, and then, you know, I do enjoy having a sort of baseline to work from each and every time, which is why I developed that profile, and it just shortens all the work to some degree. Okay, and then I'm just thinking if there's anything else I would do here. Before, after, that's pretty much that. I'm good with that. The one thing I might do is just to give it a little bit more of that pop. Sometimes I'll bring my whites up, but then bring my highlights down to balance that out. And in this case, I'm not sure that it's really going to buy us much. We are coming up across the ceiling that we've set for ourselves here. So let's see, up and down. Yeah, it does bring overall tones up. So I'm happy with that. Where we were, where we are. Where we were, where we are. And done. Out of curiosity, I'm going to reset this and go back to the profile. Pretty close, right? Like if we brought down the exposure here, we'd probably, here, let's do that. Sorry, I like to do this to myself just to test myself sometimes. So we're gonna go to Photo, Virtual Copy, Develop, Reset, and we're just going to apply the Quattro. I always do that. It's not the Quattro for you guys, it's just the OMTC profile. The OMTC profile, and then I'd probably bring the contrast down a little bit. So this is with the profile. This is what I just did by hand. I mean, they are very similar. I have a little more saturation here, which is interesting, right? So a little more warmth and a little more saturation. So I would say like I'd warm this up touch, bring up the vibrance versus the saturation in this case. In most cases, honestly, I will work more through the vibrance, and then I'll even bring the saturation down to counter that. It's just because vibrance just treats color in a different way than saturation. Saturation's a little too heavy-handed and global, whereas vibrance kind of has a more, I don't know, sophisticated approach, if I may. All right, so this was tweaked by hand. This is with the OMTC profile. And you know what's funny is I prefer the profile. It's a little cleaner. And I don't even know what I did here. I must have done something to the greens as well as the teals down here. But the profile, you know, there's a reason that I created that thing. It kind of gets me where I want to go pretty darn quick. And that's so funny. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I could sit here and now start to refine the water because I want to get this effect. But I'm not going to do that. It'll be too annoying and too long of a video. Okay, an ERF file. Is that like an Epson file? I'm also just holy bananas. I just got to know what this camera is because, yeah, an Epson file. All right. I don't know what camera this is, but man, I want it now. Like, this looks amazing to me right out of the gate. This is how I would like to make this look. I don't know that there's much of anything that I would do to this, to be honest, because this is going to make it look crazy. This is way, way, way too much. We're already in such a sweet spot, and it's so funny that this is an image I just wouldn't do anything to. Honestly, I would just leave it. All right, Drew. Okay, I know what this is gonna be. I bet you it's a Fuji X100V because Drew and I have talked about this. Drew is a great photographer, and we have just briefly discussed it. It doesn't say here, interesting. We have briefly discussed our common, that's really interesting. I don't know what this is. Drew, comment on this video if I have it right, because I am willing to guess that this, oh, and it has some stuff built into it. So this is, I'm assuming, your edit. So let's make a copy. Yeah, so we have discussed the X100V because I am personally of the feeling that that camera is just unbelievably awesome in so many ways. Great lens, nice JPEGs, but man, the feeling of the camera, in Drew's words, leaves me feeling a little cold. I don't love shooting it, and I actually really dislike working with the files, the raw files. I like the JPEGs, but the raw files drive me a little crazy. I just don't know what it is. It just feels like a brittle camera file. I don't know. Can't describe it. Okay. So first off, I'm just going to bring that exposure down because that exposure was hot. Let's go to auto white balance, see what we get. This looks a little heavy. I mean, what is going on with this X100? Oh, maybe it's not an X100V. My bad if it is. Not. I'm really curious to know what this is. So I'm going to guess, actually, just looking at it now. Let me see if the lens profile gives anything away here. Profile. Oh, it's a Leica M Summicron. So that means we have some kind of a Leica. Which Leica might this be? Very interesting. Now I'm very confused. Okay, sorry, going back. I'm going to try to stay focused here. Okay, daylight, clearly, so let's just do that versus auto because it's more accurate. And then again, let's try the profile. I have a feeling it might not work great here. It's not terrible. Okay, we're going to bring it down. I'd say 50. And what I am looking for here, I am really curious to know what you were shooting here. I can probably just go on your Instagram and figure it out. All right, white. Let's go a little bit warmer than what we're seeing here. Again, I always gravitate towards being warmer than not, and definitely pulling back some of this magenta. Probably not that far, but like maybe 5, 4. Okay. Then let's see what else. I'll play with the dehaze a little bit, but I don't think I'm going to do anything there. I definitely feel like this is, I don't know, it's just an interesting, it feels like the highlights are just going pretty quickly, like there's somewhat limited latitude. But I like bringing a little richness into that water. Okay, there we go, I'm done. That is what I do. So that's before, and that is after. Oh, whoops, I'm not rating these because this is not my Lightroom catalog per standard. Okay, Florian, thank you for submitting. I love, by the way, just like seeing, I feel like I have a very personal connection to everyone who submitted, so thank you. I do appreciate it. Okay, CR2. So again, we are dealing with Canon. It doesn't say. It's really interesting, I think, particularly with older cameras, and I don't know which Canon this is, but a lot of the older cameras just don't have any metadata built into them. I guess they weren't doing it back then. Okay, putting on the profile. I'm just going to reduce this probably to 75, maybe 70, and bring down the exposure a little bit. Let's try daylight white balance. Just warms it up a little bit. Interestingly enough, like I kind of like the cold vibe just a little bit more. And I think I'll bring this back up, not so much, but like there. Oh, that's funny, that's 0. Okay, let's try bringing the highlights down. Like I said, most of this for me is just trial and error. I just try stuff out, see if I like it. If I don't, I dump it, change it, whatever. All right, now I just do an eye check. Where were we? There we were. Here we are now. Mids are a little too hot. Here's another way to control. So if I can see, just generally speaking, I'm like, oh, this is just kind of all sitting in the middle. And again, this is just spending enough time doing this. This is just practice. I now recognize, okay, I probably want to just come down here. It's a little hot. It's not going to affect my highlights. And again, all of this is, it's just, how do I say this? If you can see, I wish I could point and you could see me pointing at the same time. I'm just hovering over this section, but you can see that it's corresponding to the blacks. It lights up black. So watch the blacks here when I come over here. That's lighting it up. Same with shadows. This is going to be exposure, so like your mids, your highlights, and your whites. Okay, so this histogram up here is also, you can click and drag, but it's not different than what you're doing down here. Sometimes it's just an easier, or it's faster, or it's, you know, closer to your finger. So that's all I'm doing, is just dragging the exposure down by taking those mids. And okay, I'm going to focus. What do I want to do here? I don't think there's a lot more I want to do, except maybe bring these magentas again, just down a little bit, and bring my, in this case, I actually think I want to bring a universal saturation up just a little bit. Maybe the vibrance up a little bit. Let's take this all the way back down. So subtle. You're not really going to see a difference. And let's take the clarity down a little bit. And the dehaze up. Very slight. Okay, so really, really, a little goes a long way. And sorry, I should take all this info off so you can see better. A little goes a long way. So full screening, before. Oh, you can't do that in full screen, which is really annoying. Maybe I can do it like this. All right, before, after. So now immediately my eye goes, oh yeah, I went a little too far on the yellows, right? So like, I think I'm gonna pare this back even farther. I do like it, it's a stylized look, but I think I need to clean up the yellows. And what you can see is, and this is from the profile, it is how it was developed and what, you know, it was intentional, but it doesn't always flatter every image. Watch the skin tones, right? So it's kind of this chalky magenta, got a little bit of almost a purple hue here. But here, now it's starting to get into a little bit of the green, blue, cool tonality, which again, you might be totally cool with. In my case, I think I want to calm the green down a little bit. And I do feel like it's not showing up so much here, but when I'm seeing a color cast of any kind, I'm checking to see, is it just affecting like the highlights, the mids, or the shadows, or is it more global? I'm not seeing it in the highlights here, and I'm looking in the shadows. The shadows look pretty clean, so then I will just go probably into my highlights and look at those and play with that a little bit. And coming down to the blue, I really don't have enough here. It's only saturation of 2, so I'm going to bring this up. And again, if you really want to see what it's doing, you can start to see by just going extreme on something, and then you can dial it back. Okay. It's super, super subtle, but I do see it. I'm like looking in this box right here, and when I turn it on, this just looks cleaner up here to me. So, okay, before and after, and I would leave it there. Okay, going to this one. Jonas, you sent me my favorite photo. This is without question this just makes me so freaking happy. I love this photo so much, hence why I made it the thumbnail to this video. Okay, this is from an Olympus, no question, because I love Olympus. It makes sense. Okay, I'm just gonna go straight into the profile, and I can tell you a few things. I know I'm gonna bring this down a little bit. I've worked with so many Olympus files at this point that I can kind of gauge where I might need to go here. I'm gonna definitely need to bring down the magentas. Let's see here. I think I would bring down the clarity. I think I'd bring up the blacks maybe. Let's see. Not too much. I mean, it's actually more than I would have expected, but 20, 23, 22. I might bring down the whites here just because it's quite a punchy scene already. I like my punch, but this already has a lot going for it. So I'm just trying to even out the light a little bit so it's not so heavy on them. And then I'm actually going to bring the saturation down here. Maybe the vibrance just a little bit. And then here's where I mean, honestly, I'm pretty happy with this. But if I wanted to take it to the extra nth degree, I'm going to look at this hue a little bit. Let's just look at the skin tone. And just balance it out a little bit. It's really subtle. Look at that. I just went -1 on the orange. This is going too far to the pinks. So I'm going to actually, this is interesting. I'm going to go probably closer to the yellows. Oh my gosh, my finger's stuck. Okay. Then let's bring it down. And while I do like that, I think I'm going to bring this closer to 5. So it still has some of that. Bring the luminance down, which it's going to basically resaturate it, but it might resaturate it in a little bit of a more natural fashion. So 15, maybe too far, 10. This is a constant. This is where it becomes such a back and forth. Okay, before, after. Now what it's doing, I want to actually bring, so the skin was too much in the global saturation, but now that we've desaturated the skin and brought the tones to a little bit more of a yellow place, I'm going to resaturate this overall. I'm going to boost the exposure. And then I'm going to play with this white balance a little bit. I like it just a little bit warm, tiny bit warmer than it was. And then I'm going to go through everything, just make sure. And then I'm going to dehaze a little bit. No, just a little bit, 5%. And let's bring this down a little again. All right, so I think I'm actually going to go back to 0 on this. Before, after, before, after. I just adore this so much. I'm not going to straighten it. I'm not going to do anything to it. It just is magic. It's funny. I'm still seeing a little bit of this, and I think it's just in the highs. So let's just look at the color grade really fast. And I'm just feeling like I see a little bit of that magenta. And I'm just going to balance it out with a little bit of lime. Oops. Oh, it's super subtle. I'll go all the way so you can really see what's happening here, but it's just, and I don't feel like it's the highlights that I was trying to affect after all. So let's try the midtones. Yeah, it's more the midtones. No, you know, and this is why you do these things. You experiment to see. And I actually like it right where it was. I'm always just, and then I'll walk away from this and come back to it because you do lose sight of stuff. So I'm going to leave that for now. And I may revisit this because this is one of those images where you're like, okay, I really want to spend a little more time here and play with stuff. Like even just maybe bring it down. I don't know. So 20, where was I? 15. I don't know. But I just love this image. Okay. So clearly this is a little hot. I mean, when we look in here, we can already see this is quite desaturated, quite bright, but looking at the histogram, there's also a lot of dark. So I'm going to bring just the highlights down to recover some of the detail in her dress. I love this scene. I don't know what's going on, but I dig it. And let's try that profile. So I do try to get the exposure to the right place first and then apply the profile, because the profile will not adjust the exposure. It will adjust the luminance, but not the exposure if you've dialed it down. And that's the beauty of a profile. So then I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit just to even it out. Definitely need the white balance adjusted. Let's see what auto does. It gives us a nice starting point. Again, the pinks always feel too much to me. Okay, and then maybe a little more vibrance here. I would even maybe look at, maybe just a little bump in the saturation. This is overall looking pretty good to me. It does have, I'm trying to think how, I mean, like, let's look at the pure color here. It does have, looks pretty clean. I'm just seeing if there's any color casts anywhere that we'd want to neutralize. I was thinking that it was green, like there's a little bit of a green color cast, but I actually don't know that there is. But we'll try a global alteration just to sort of see what it does. Okay, so it does do something. I am seeing a little bit of a shift here. So this is getting a little bit too pinky, but maybe right there, which is funny because I was like thinking that we didn't want that magenta. All right, let's look at this. Yep, that is a step too far, but it is doing something. So let's try that. I think that's right. Yes. It is definitely adding a little pink in there, but I think it's nice. I would stick with that. And then you can play with the luminance here. Maybe just bringing it down makes it blend a little bit more. And guys, if you're not seeing what I'm seeing, don't freak out. This is like extremely subtle what I'm doing right now. There's also the blend, which I don't usually mess with. This is, okay. So I'm going to leave it there. I like this. Yep, that is doing what I want it to do. Just softens it up. And boom. Okay, another one from Tristan. This is awesome. I'm curious to know, Tristan, let us know what camera this is, because this has really interesting color. I don't know if this is processed or if this is right out of the gate, but this is a lot of, I mean, this to me is like, oh yeah, this is a CCD sensor. Watch me be wrong, but that reads CCD to me, to the point where I actually don't know that I would do too much. Maybe if anything, I might bring the vibrance down a little bit and the saturation down a little bit and just adjust the yellows. Ha, funny, because I think that is actually all I'm gonna do. Oh, I actually added yellow. So added yellow, maybe the one sort of tweak in addition, because I love how this is all punching. So I think it's really just the yellows, not in white balance, but in actual hue and saturation that I might bring down. So I'm going to bring this down a little bit in the yellows, just neutralize that grass a little bit. I'll bring the luminance up though, just to like not lose it. Still want it to feel lively and healthy. And let's just play with the luminance. The hue. I like this. Like, I do tend to bring my grass into a little bit of a yellow place, but then bring up the luminance and bring down the saturation overall. So before, after. This is wonderful. Maybe DM me on the side with those cameras. No, put it out there for everyone. I do want to buy it though, probably. Just from this image alone. All right. This, no idea. Okay. Not Arthur Miller. Okay. This is a JPEG. If you are related to the writer, I am envious. I have been to Arthur Miller's house in Amagansett in East Hampton. I actually stayed there. This is such a total segue. I stayed there as a kid, not knowing it was his house, and like, I don't even know if any of us realized it was his house at one point, but he apparently lived there with Marilyn Monroe, who at the time I was like, I don't know if everyone went through this, but sorry, I'm talking about stuff that's not that interesting, but I was really into Marilyn Monroe. Let's just leave it at that. I feel like every child had to have one celebrity they were fixated on, and she was mine. We're talking real young though, like 10. Okay. So going back, we've gotten the exposure to like where I'm roughly happy. I will probably tweak a little bit more after the profile is applied. Profile is just always going to be bringing a little bit more pop, which is what it was designed to do. I am going to bring it down a little bit, and maybe the clarity, let's see what, it's so interesting with older files. If they get really crunchy, bringing the clarity down can help. I don't think this is a particularly old file, to be honest, but I am seeing just maybe a slight bit of chromatic aberration back here. It's really hard to tell. A little bit of purple fringing on the tree, and I will show you what I do because a lot of older cameras have this issue. It's not abnormal, and it's certainly older cameras that don't have RAW will have it baked into the JPEG, so there are easy ways to get rid of that, and that is just here. If you go to the lens correction, you go into manual and you defringe a little bit. So I'm not seeing a great deal happening here, so there's probably not a ton, and I am zoomed in to the max. I might just bring this purple hue down just to, there we go. Okay, so before, after, again, it's super duper subtle. I don't even think that was worth it, but now we've done it. It just cleans it up ever so slightly. And let's see what else. I think the texture on this could be upped a little bit just to, again, the clarity has been brought down, so it's a little softer, but then you can counteract that with texture, which gives it like a little micro contrast. Let's see. Another way to look for this is like, look in this brick detail right here. So we'll just reset the clarity. The clarity is giving it that sort of like broader, black kind of crunch, and then the texture is giving it more refined detail or clarity within the very fine detail. It's funny, they do similar things, but I would say texture is a little more subtle and tends to be where I go for my contrast. All right, before, after, before, after. Oh, this is beautiful. I love this. Carlos, what a beautiful capture. Nicely done, my friend. ISO 400, love seeing that. Okay, XF23. So this is a Fuji. Not sure which one, but it's a Fuji file. Maybe like an MX1 or something, who knows. All right, let's go to auto white balance right off the bat just to sort of see where we're at. This is looking good. It basically captured the right auto white balance right out of the gate. Let me bring the color, or sorry, the exposure down. I like a little bit of low key in these kind of bright backlit situations. I'm going to just bring this down a little bit because I think even a little less is going to be nice. And before, after. I just adore this. We could look at bringing the highlights down, but I don't even know if you need to do that. I don't mind having kind of a blown out look to this. Maybe a little bit is nice. Yeah, let's do that. That's all I would do. This is just gorgeous. You know, one thing I am going to say is, you know, this is the white balance as regarded. I think I actually, again, just countering, I see so much magenta in there, and it doesn't particularly bother me. This picture feels kind of stylized and it's very beautiful, but you could definitely push this into probably more of a natural place with a little less magenta, let's say like 7, 6, and a little less yellow. And that's probably truer to life. There we go. I love this. This is just wonderful. Adore it. All right, this is another Tristan. So I'm not going to guess what the file is from camera-wise. Let's try auto white balance. This is great. This is a good starting point, and this is a wonderful. I love the light on this. This is beautiful. And with the profile, I'll bring it back a little bit. This is actually where I would go the opposite direction with what I normally do, which is bring highlights down and whites down. I'm going to go up here to create some real drama. Go up. Actually, the contrast I'll knock down. The blacks, I think I'll keep down. And shadows, maybe just a little shadow detail. There we go. And then I am seeing a bit of a color cast here, and I'm wondering if we just hit the white balance. I like it on the warm side, but maybe just not quite as warm. And I'm actually adding a little magenta here, which is funny. Not usually what I do. Let me see if there's, you know, I'm just going to try this another way. It's just adding a little bit more of that drama in the curve. Yeah, I love this. Love it. This is kind of my perfect digicam shot. I really adore this. There's nothing like totally in focus here. There's motion. It's a little bit of a Dutch angle. It just feels alive to me. I adore it. This feels like a memory, totally made with a lot of meaning. So that's a personal aside. I know that's not what we're talking about, but I do love this. Okay. Putting on the profile, knocking it back a little bit. This is a little too saturated. So I'm going to bring this down to 11. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit. Not a lot. Let's see these highlights. Soften it a little bit. Bring the contrast down a little. No, the contrast is fine. Yeah, before, after, before, after. I really like this. I wonder if I would do anything with, no, I mean, maybe a little bit with the shadow. Oh, that's actually a lot, 46. 33 with the shadows. I like that. Kind of gives it a little bit more of that roll off. And out of curiosity, what happens when we clarify a little bit? Just 5. JPEG from, okay, this has a USM, so this is a Canon of some sort. Sam submitted this. Not sure what Canon file this, but again, we are not working with a RAW file. We are working with a JPEG. So let's start with some color balancing, which is, it's doing a pretty good job. Those skin tones are looking good. Let's apply this. I have a feeling oh yeah, okay. That's pretty nice actually. So I'm going to bring the contrast way down on this. I'm going to bring the highlights down. I'm going to bring the midtones up, aka the exposure up. Shadows up. I'm going to bring the blacks up. It just feels all of it is a little too hard dark. It wasn't under, intentionally or not, it was, favoring an underexposed format. Now, the other thing I will say, so this happens a lot. People go, oh, I need to have all the information in my histogram, and therefore I can't let things blow up. Well, I disagree with that. And in this case, for example, you have a JPEG where you have actually a decent amount of information down here or up here in the clouds, but it just starts to become a little unnatural. So I'm going to let that blow out, and I'm actually going to bring it up so that there isn't any information there. And I can bring the whites down, and now it just feels soft overall and really quite lovely. I might bring this down just a touch. But yeah, I want to avoid information in the clouds because otherwise it starts to break for me a little bit. All right, I like this. Just playing back and forth to see what I want my white point to be. See, this is why I said 20 pictures. Like, I have a lot more pictures in here, but I might just cap it at 20 because this is what I'm saying. I'll be here all day. All right, so I'm going to just quickly go through and select an image. This is great. I love all of these images, but I do want to pick something we haven't done. So this is an ORF, which means this is an Olympus RAW file. Okay, so we don't know which camera it's from, but it is something to work with. All right, so we're gonna go to auto, just see what this gives us. It's funny, Olympus does this too. I feel like the auto white balance on these Olympus cameras is, it's great on the camera itself, but when it's in Lightroom, it does tend to make it a weird color, I think. All right, profile. And so I do have a yellow cast built into my profile. It's a little strong here, especially on a cloudy day. Any kind of global color grade is going to really stick out. I'm going to soften the contrast on this. I am going to actually bring, is it the highlights or the whites that I want to pop? I think it's going to be the whites. Yeah, there we go. I love this. Before, after. Again, just a softer roll off that's built into that profile, a little bit of a yellow cast. I do love this, Carlos. What is this? Hemsglass. Well, in Swedish we say glass, which is ice cream, and this does look like ice cream, so Hemsglass, maybe somewhere in, I have no idea, I can only speak for Swedes. And I can't even really do that. Okay, so let's go to profile. This is definitely too much. So we're going to bring this back. And just looking at this image, what I want to do here is create a ton of mood. So I'm going to bring the contrast up. I'm going to bring the exposure down. I'm going to bring the dehaze up. And I'm going to bring the whites. Actually, yeah, the whites, the highlights up, highlights down, whites up. And I love that as a mood. Carlos, just bringing the fire. Konditori. Okay, this is in Sweden. Amazing, so cool. I'm Swedish by my mother's background, so spent a lot of my childhood in Stockholm. All right, so this just feels like a Wes Anderson still. I love it. I actually don't even want to bring this down too much. It's such a good punchy sort of vibe. So it's just kind of bringing the luminance of these yellows and reds up. And oops, that's not what I meant to do. Before, after. No question is before more realistic. It is. After is more stylized, and it should be. That's kind of the goal. Ignacio. This is a Samsung Galaxy 20S freaking phone camera. I love that. Look at this. That looks amazing. Okay, let's put the profile on here. And immediately, you know I'm going to put this away from the magentas because it's going hard on the magentas. I would not have guessed that this was a camera phone. That is pretty rad. I'm going to take down some of this yellow. And because it is a camera phone, I mean, we're going to get a little bit of this, you know, it's actually got next to no purple fringing, which is phenomenal. We could look at whether or not we want to take any more of that out. I mean, honestly, oh, there it is. A little bit is right in there. So I don't know if you can see that. Keep your eye right here on this line and what this is doing, right? So before you, again, I don't know if this reads on YouTube, but there is definitely a bit of a line, a purple fringe. It's not even quite purple, but this is desaturating that and just creating a little bit of a cleaner edge, which does sort of imply visually, subtly, or, you know, I should say subconsciously or not, it looks a little less digital, at least to my eye. The other thing I'm going to do, just looking at this, there's a lot of sort of processing that's happening in the file itself, so I might bring down the clarity to soften the whole thing, but bring up the detail. And again, that's just kind of to offset a little bit of the digital stuff. And then the overall pink of this world, I might just balance out this way. So, and then the shadows here are now falling into far too much green. And I think the green overall is just a little bit strong. Let's see, I think that's a good neutral place. I'm looking really in here, but then the shadows need to go the opposite way, which is funny, right? And it is a phone file, so you can only stretch it so far. But before, after, it's again very subtle. You're seeing it kind of on the post here. And then overall before and after. Before, after, maybe a little more warmth and a little less. Okay. There is a point at which a file like this breaks, and you can start to see it here, like there's some color blotching and the shadows here too. But again, depending on where you're posting this, it doesn't even matter. The other thing, I'm going to copy this just so we have it. What I have not covered at all here is black and white. So we can go to black and white and work with it that way, in which case I'd bring this up. Now, I like really punchy black and whites for the most part. So I'm definitely going to bring up my dehaze. I'm going to bring down my highlights. I'm going to bring up my contrast, but I'm going to bring up my shadows as well. And just depending on the vibe that we want to go with, like I like this, it's strong. It's really just leaving a little bit of silhouette. There's not like, it's not crazy on detail or information. Like here, we're just blacking this out. It's, I think, are we even... Yeah, so you can see we are just crunching the blacks here. I am totally okay with that though. I don't need information in those spaces. for my eye, and I would add some grain to this as well. It's the very last one, and you definitely want to zoom in and look at maybe like a darker area where you can read this. So this area should be good for the grain addition. We're going to bring it up. I like a chunky grain with a roughness. Let's try that. That looks good to me. All right. Where are we at? Sorry, guys. We're at number 26. I'm going to do one more after this. And then we'll call it a day. Otherwise, we'll be here forever. All right, so this, the number one issue I see here is white balance. And that is going to be the case for like 90% of images, 90% of the time. All right, then I'm going to go to the quadrate profile. So that's interesting. This is definitely not probably going to work in this scenario because a little bit will be great, but it's doing a little bit too much to the highlights. So we want to bring up the highlights a little bit here. Overall whites can come up. Actually, maybe what I'll do is the whites, highlights can come down just a touch. Then we can bring the shadows up. I actually prefer, and this is because this is a JPEG, so like if we're trying to bring up the shadows, it's just going to get this kind of weird color noise. Like, again, I don't mind it necessarily if that's what you're going for, but it's going to make the saturation in these areas get a little wonky. So I'm actually going to keep the shadows where they were and really draw my attention to her. So I might bring the exposure down even further. I might bring the contrast down, and then add a little bit of a vignette to reduce the distraction around here. Like your eye is going to go to kind of where the light draws it, and so some of this is going to be distracting. I'm going to bring in the post highlight. I'm going to reduce the midpoint just to the maximum around this way. Feather, don't want too much of a feather. Highlights, yeah, I don't really want to retain too much of the highlight here because this highlight's not, you know, again, gonna do anything for us. And I always like to add a little bit of grain. I haven't been showing that, but I do tend to add. Lately I haven't been because digital files have their inherent grain, but this is an ISO 6400 shot. What is this shot with? Not sure. And I don't have lens info here outside of 24 millimeters. But if it's 6400 and it looks like this, I mean, it's a modern camera. So it's definitely a CMOS camera. And let's see if there's anything else I would adjust. I mean, I actually don't mind bringing her face up a little bit. And then, okay, now I don't oftentimes go to this level of adjustment. In fact, I almost never do. Like, this is only if I'm like really aiming to do something specific for a specific image. I just don't spend the time to do this kind of stuff. But in this case, because that highlight is distracting me, I am going to take it down with a gradient filter. I'm going to bring my whites down back there. I'm going to bring my exposure down back there. And I'm going to just kind of black it out to the degree that I can. If I am going to do that, though, I will likely need to sort of adjust some of the other things. But you see how much less distracting that is? Just that small thing. So turning this off and turning it on. It just, your eye isn't drawn here anymore. And I would almost even do a secondary gradient. As you can see, I don't do this often. I couldn't even find it, but now I see it. Okay. I'm going to reduce the fall off of this. I'm going to turn this around, no, this way. Okay, and then we're just going to do a little bit of the same here. Not dramatic, you don't want it to look fake, but The thing with this one too is actually both of them, you can desaturate it a bit. And then a little less colored light. But again, you don't want to go too far. I mean, like this one maybe just too far. Yeah, it's not even necessary. I mean, it helps a little bit, but like not really super necessary. Oops, wrong mask. Okay, so I would leave it there. And the last one I'm going to do is you, I'm sorry. I am not even sure that I'm saying your name right, and I feel like we've talked so much. I love this photo. It's just beautiful, and I'm guessing it doesn't, oh, it does say Ricoh GX200. Amazing. That's so cool. I love that camera. That is what Job was shooting of Sophie and I in my last video. All his cool sort of dragged shutter speed strobe shots were with the GX200. Okay, I just love this. I mean, like, look at this grain pattern and everything. It just has a vibe already. I don't think that my profile is going to do much here. A little bit, it gives again that like warmer wash. I think if it were just up to me, what I do like is I kind of love this low-key vibe to it, so maybe I would take up the highlights or the exposure, but I'd just continue to press on the vibe that it already has. Yeah, I love this. It's just so pretty, and you and your wife are just awesome. So it's funny because, again, when I do auto, I don't know if you're seeing it, but to me, again, just too much magenta. I don't like things leaning into the magenta, so I pull it into the greens and the yellows. That's where I like it. Now you see how I edit my photos, or your photos in this case. Let's talk about those presets I mentioned. So the two are Cascade, which are Benj Heisch's presets that he created. Benj Heisch, if you don't know, is a wedding photographer here on YouTube. And it's so funny because I have tried so many presets, and I have to say his are some of the best. Like, he really has dialed his process and his look, and it aligns with the look that I often look to get out of my images. That was a lot of looks. But he has really fantastic presets. I think they are absolutely worth it. And they're, very flexible presets. There's a lot of sub sort of sections that are built in. And if you walk through his tutorials, you can sort of see how all of this works. He's really also focused on the skin tones, which I appreciate because I tend to really like to photograph people. And a lot of the time the presets can, from other companies can really get the skin tones wrong and don't have a way to sort of dial that in outside of manually adjusting it yourself, which is something I'm comfortable doing. But if you're not, Benj has you covered with a lot of sort of diminutive tweaks that really just slightly alter the tone, the luminance of the skin, which I really appreciate. The other presets that I can definitely recommend are I'm going to get this wrong. Good Light? I had never heard of this company before. They're really good presets. Like, there's only a handful of them. It's not crazy. It's like 8 different presets with some light modifications in terms of grain. And that's pretty much it. But it is really, really great as a base color for almost all the files I've worked through. So I really enjoy that pack as well, and definitely can recommend that. Okay, so there is actually a third preset that I can strongly recommend. She has a number of packs available, but there's something really magical about her presets, and you've probably seen them on other, people's photography. I discovered her, I actually don't even remember how I discovered her work, but she's a good photographer on her own, but then she created all of these amazing presets. Her name is Rebecca Lilly, and the preset pack that I would personally recommend is pack 4. She was shooting a Leica M9 at the time that she developed that, if I'm not mistaken, and it works really nicely on CCD images, but it also translates very beautifully to a lot of CMOS images. On CMOS, what I find it does is make it a little bit more neutral and muted, and so sometimes I have to bump up the contrast or like do additional tweaks to give it a punch that I really enjoy. But the files coming out of like the M9 from like those types of cameras are often, sorry, like I just got a text message, are often quite punchy on their own. So it just does a really beautiful job with those CCD files. And her eye is really, really strong for color, and black and whites are great. So those are three I highly recommend, totally stand behind, very comfortable for my workflow and for the cameras that I shoot. Last thing was alternative techniques. So this is not a technique I have used very much at all. I actually recently discovered it, and I'm going to put the video where I discovered it down below because he's going to go into more detail about how to do this. But it is a photographer who is using digicams and digital cameras. I mean, it's the same thing, but like digicams as in the vernacular point and shoots to, you know, the Olympus E300s, the old sort of CCD centered cameras, and more matching it to work with his film imagery. He's actually using Nate Photographics Negative Lab Pro on his digital files, which after I saw the video, I was like, oh my God, that's genius. Like, why didn't I think of that? Because of course, most people who are shooting film are digitizing through their DSLRs, and it is using the DSLRs sort of as a DNG negative to invert the negative that you're scanning through your DSLR scanning, and applying a color curve and, you know, all the different facets of film conversion to digital. Why wouldn't you just do that with a standard image? It's quite genius, actually. I haven't tested this extensively, but it's well worth experimenting if you are so inclined. And if you are a film shooter already, why not make use of what you have and play around with that? All right, so there it is. That is my post-processing deluge. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please put them down below. Additionally, if you have other preset packs or recommendations for techniques, etc., please comment with those details because this should be a forum for everything post-processing. Anyway, so that's everything I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.